Hey everyone, welcome back to Self-Serving Skillet. Today on the show, I'm gonna show you how to make the most delicious, juicy, that's right, not dry, tamale, beef tamale, all beef tamale that you've ever had. And you wanna get started with this with the beef that is free to view on my Patreon. That's gonna be in the link below, but let's do that after the video. For right now, you want to grab yourself some corn husks and soak them overnight in cool water. You can also soak them for about 3 hours, 4 hours in hot water. It's up to you. It makes very little difference. Now, what's so nice about this is that these corn husks are all dry and they're going to take a little bit of time to rehydrate, but that's okay because the rest of this also takes a little bit of time and you can do it while your corn husks are soaking. So first step, this recipe is gonna make about 20 to 25 tamales depending on how you roll them, but I'm gonna take 3 Guajillo peppers and 4 Ancho peppers. Those are dried peppers, and cut them open, remove all of the seeds, and sort of rip everything into about inch pieces. It doesn't really matter. This is all going in the food processor. I just want to break it down without the seeds, without the stems. And then once those are all processed, I'm gonna add those to a pot with a quartered onion and as many cloves of garlic as you feel are necessary. Personally, I like to keep the vampires away. We're gonna steep all of this in hot water, get it to a boil. Mine took about half an hour to get everything really soft and ready for the food processor. And when everything is soft enough to go in that food processor, we're gonna strain it out, but reserve the water. That's gonna be very useful to us. We're going to need extra water anyway, and why not use what we already have? So into the food processor goes all of the solids and just enough liquid to make it process smoothly. Don't add too much. You can always add more, and you're gonna have a hard time if you add too much because the next step is about taking the water out. But before we move on, I want to get in there with about half a little spoon of oregano and a full little spoon of cumin. Now, I use whole cumin seeds, but you don't have to. I like to toast them up and then grind them up with the mortar and pestle. You can also use a spice grinder. You can also buy pre-ground cumin. There's nothing wrong with that. I just really like the taste of toasted cumin. Now, when you have everything to sort of the consistency of a paste, I'm going to go into a frying pan with about a pound of that beef that I talked about at the beginning of the episode here. Link is in the description below. And to that, we're gonna add all of the lovely tamale sauce that we just made. And we want all of that to simmer together. That beef is gonna continue to fall apart. Some of the water is gonna start to simmer off. We're gonna get a lot better of a consistency if we just let it on low and slow for a little while. You gotta let your corn husks soak anyway. So you're gonna keep a watchful eye on that, stirring it every once in a while, but pretty much you can let it simmer to your heart's content as long as you're there checking it out. And while we're doing that, we can prepare our masa. Now, the masa is the part that we're gonna spread onto the corn husk, what's gonna hold the meat inside. So for this particular masa, you can also make masa for tortillas. I'm using tamal, but this is Harina, and it is a very finely ground corn flour that we're gonna make our masa. So for this many tamales, I want 4 cups of Harina, and to that we want to add a full tablespoon of baking powder and half a tablespoon salt. Mix that around so that it's well dispersed, and 3 cups of warm water. Now you remember that water that we saved from all of the chilies that's full of flavor. I'm just gonna use that, and I just so happen to have exactly 3 cups. It's not always gonna work out like that, and I didn't plan it that way. And you're gonna add that to your corn flour and knead. Now, we're not needing to produce a gluten development. We don't need to make this stick together. In fact, it won't stick together because there's no gluten in corn to hold that dough together. It's going to be very loose. What we do want to do is get that moisture all around that masa harina and make sure there are no dry spots. And I'm gonna leave it for a little bit of time, just 20 minutes or so, to hydrate fully. And then we go in with our fat. And we're using today beef tallow. Tallow is to beef as lard is to pork, and traditionally these are made with lard. I really do enjoy, though, when I get to use multiple products from the same animal to make one thing. There's nothing wrong with using lard for this, even if you're doing the beef tamales, the pork, the chicken, anything that really you want. There are sweet tamales as well. So I'm gonna wanna melt about a cup of this and knead it slowly into my masa. Now this is going to help hold it together a little better than just the water alone. It's still not going to be like a bread product, but it's going to hold tighter. It's going to compact. You're going to be able to play with it a little bit. And I also used a couple forkfuls of this in with my meat mix because this is going to help keep it moist. And if you've ever had a really dry tamale, that's why there's not enough fat in the meat or in the masa. And by the time this rests for about another 20-30 minutes, you want it to come to close to room temperature, maybe a little warmer than room temperature. It'll be nice and spreadable, but it'll also stick together as good as it's gonna get. Your meat is probably done by this point, and you want this not to be runny, but also not to be dry. You need to hit that sweet spot in between. The fat is really gonna help keep it nice and moist, but you need to not lose so much water as well. And my corn husks are done. So I'm gonna take 1 corn husk, lay it out. I'm going to take a handful of this masa, wet my hand and press it into the corn husk. What I really want is sort of a patty shape, because I'm gonna come in with a little bit of this beef, fold the corn husk over, and make myself sort of a little empanada, sort of a little calzone. And then it's a little bit like rolling sushi. You're going to close it up and squeegee it down and then roll over. Make sure to tuck that end underneath so that nothing comes out when we steam them. You can also tie these up with extra pieces of corn husk. I've never really had an issue with masa or with meat falling out of these tamales, so I skipped that step. But if you want to make it look nice and neat, if you want to make it look professional, you can go ahead and tie them up with little pieces of corn husk. And another thing I see a lot of is putting the lard into a stand mixer and whipping it up. And that's just not the way that I was taught. Apparently it makes for a fluffier tamale, but the baking powder really does a good job of that anyway. Remember to make it baking powder, not baking soda. Baking powder reacts to heat and baking soda reacts to acid. So you want to throw those in a vessel that you can steam in, and you want to keep them up off of the water while still being able to have enough water to steam them for about an hour. I really despise single-use kitchen tools. I think that they just take up space and they're corny. So what I did was I bought a metal colander and that would fit inside of an existing stock pot. And this is my steamer setup, and that allows me to put enough water in here. We really only need about this much to last for the whole hour, but I'll fill it up about halfway just to make sure that I don't run out. And any leftover corn husks that you didn't use can get used right now. We're gonna stack these all up so that none of them are sort of falling over into the water. They're all more or less looking upwards. And then we're gonna cover them with any unused corn husks that we didn't use, and that's gonna help keep all the steam inside, and that's just gonna enrich their steam bath experience. Cover that up, put it on a boil. Once it starts boiling, set your timer for an hour, and you're done. You don't need to watch this, assuming you put enough water in. One trick that I've heard, if you can't put a lot of water in, is to put a penny on the bottom of the pot, and the penny will rattle around until there's almost no water left in there. So when you don't hear the penny anymore, then it's time to add more water. I don't like that because it's kind of the opposite of an alarm system, and you get used to the penny rattling around. So if you're off in La La Land, if you're watching TV or you're doing your taxes, or you're not gonna notice a lack of irritation, you're going to notice an alarm system. So if you're worried, set a timer for every 20 minutes, put a kettle of water on so that water's already nice and hot. And if you need to replace some water, you're doing it with already boiling water. And at about an hour, you can check them. Take one out with tongs, it's gonna be really hot, and roll it out on your cutting board. Try not to handle it too much. If the entire tamale comes off of the corn husk, then it's ready. If not, if any part of it that's not just hanging out there, that's kind of independent from the rest of the tamale, if any part of the whole tamale sticks to the corn husk, it's not ready yet. So I'm just gonna lay these out to cool, to come to room temperature, and then these are all gonna be freezer tamales. I'm gonna eat a couple today, but most of them are going into the freezer. So once they're cool, I'm gonna stack them in a bag and get them in the freezer. That way, whenever I want one, I can just take one or two out of the freezer, stick it in the microwave with a little steam, stick it in a little sauce pot with a little steam, whatever method you're using, you wanna re-steam them. And then I only have to make this once. And when you look at these are, they're just like little cigars, and they're so beautiful. They have that nice texture from the corn husk. They came off very cleanly. And this is how I like my tamales. 2 tamales, little avocado. I like an egg on the top. And then I come in with a little salsa, and then some sour cream with just a little bit of tahini in it. We're gonna get a little bit of all of the different elements in there. Little tamale, little egg with that nice runny yolk, some sour cream and salsa. Avocado too. It's just perfect. It's so nice and juicy because of that tallow that we used in both the masa and the meat mix. This is wonderful. I've got a whole freezer full of them. Make sure that you bring them back up to temperature with steam, otherwise they're gonna dry out, and we will have done all of that for nothing. Until next time, thank you so much for watching the beef tallow and the all-purpose pulled beef are in the description below if you want some more ways to use both of them. I did this breakfast a couple weeks ago. If you like more dishes like this that use whole chilies, right there. Mm.